What's up, everyone? Welcome to Three Chicks in a Pod. I am Megan Price. I got Jenn Lewis next to me, and below us we got Kari Johnson. What's up, ladies?
Hi, how are y'all?
Doing really well. How are y'all both doing?
Well,
I am
thank
better
you.
than I'm better than Jim because I have full voice. Poor thing.
All right, yeah, same.
Guess what? I love our show, so I can't keep me off of it.
I dig it. I'm so the dedication.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, it's just that time of year, everyone. My weather last week was 70s and 60s, and then today it's been in the 30s. So it's just been real up and down.
So
Yep.
Thursday it was 78, almost 80 here, and today we had an inch of snow.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh,
see,
I had
now you're
snow.
bragging about the snow. Whatever, go away.
Right. No, I'm so jealous. I love the snow.
Well, I
Don't
want
get
you
me
to know
wrong.
I took off my snuggie to get to be on on our podcast. So I took off my big snuggly because I'm like,
I love
eh,
it.
I
Did
probably
you
need to take
put
it
it
off.
in the washer?
Huh?
I know you've been living in that thing lately. Did you put it in the washer for the quick cycle?
Yes. You know
I
what?
was just messing with you too.
No, it
Oh
went on the
my
quick
God, I
cycle
see.
so I could get
I
it right
see.
back out. Absolutely.
It's funny. All right, so we've had just an interesting week in the sports world. It's been all over the place, and trust and believe we had to narrow down the topics because there was so much that we could have talked about this week. But we're going to start off with something pretty serious, and that was the incident at the University of Virginia. Unfortunately, there were three football players that were shot, and they passed away. Two other people were injured, and it is a former football player who is being accused as the shooter. Um, Carrie, you want to start us off because I know you went through the timeline, so kind of explain to us about what happened.
Well, I did, pardon me for just a moment while I get us live on my feed here. Um, the shooter was a walk-on player as a freshman in 2018. Did not play any games. He was a football player for one semester. Um, he is under the university. He was under the university investigation, and he was not cooperating. And on 10/27, their threat assessment team escalated his case to dig deeper because he had lied about a misdemeanor that he accept or he can took a guilty plea on for conceal and carry weapon. There is so that's two events that we know about. The third event that the threat assessment was escalating was because there was threat of a hazing, or there was talk of a hazing incident and speaking of a gun. So that was what was escalated on the 27th. That's incident number 3. And then we have the incident that happened Sunday night. So there's 4 known incidents involving guns with this young man. He is in jail. And so we should start hearing more information about him. There were 3 of their players that were killed outright, and they've had one player, I believe he's a running back, that has completed his second surgery today. His mother tweeted out his name and that God is good, and he's anticipated to have a long but full recovery. The 5th player is still in critical condition from what I could find.
And so what I saw was that Sunday they went on a field trip. They they chartered a bus to go watch a play. The young man that is the accused shooter waited until they got back on school property and then just opened fire. I don't know. We don't know if it was completely directed at if it was those football players, like if it was directed at that, if it was just towards anybody that was in the bus. I can't imagine. But then, so they locked down the school. There was about 500 people that were on lockdown for about 10 to 12 hours. People were hiding. And I just can't imagine something like that. You know, I am. There were school shootings that happened before Columbine, but I think a lot of us remember exactly where we were, what we were doing when Columbine happened. It was just something that affected the country that way. And hey, Con Man, I see you. Um, and my story was a little different about Columbine because we had a family friends, and there was one that was my brother's age, who is about 4 years older than me, and then he had a brother that was my age, and they actually were at that high school at the time when that happened.
Oh,
So,
wow.
right, and so our story was a little different with that one, and I just can't imagine. They were talking about several people were talking about how they were on lockdown and they were hiding and they were locked in closets and just fearful for their lives. I can't imagine. So, definitely prayers up for those families and just our deep
Absolutely.
condolences.
So I've actually been a teacher when we were in a lockdown situation because of threatened violence against a school. And it was fifth grade teacher here in a local public school. At first it went to, the rooms were supposed to be all dark. And then we got an all clear that we could not be near windows, which there was 3 in my room. I had to cover the window in my door, which you could see into my classroom from the outside. There were several things that had to be done to keep the kids safe. But it is, 23, I had 23 students there that day that we were in lockdown. It is not a comfortable feeling. And ours ended up being a hoax. It was because of something else that triggered that. But I can't imagine what these people. I know what I experienced, and we weren't in danger.
Right. Yeah.
It was a perceived danger, but it turned out to be a hoax. I can't imagine to be actually in that situation because the intensity that I felt that day, and that fortunately it was a Friday, so I had an entire weekend to regroup, but it was not something I would even wish on someone there's just not something you would wish on anyone to have to experience. And yet we make children experience this, from wee ones all the way up to university students. So
now I know that
makes me sad.
The accused shooter's father commented to the police and said that he was just so shocked that it was his son that was the one that was being accused of the shooting, and that he knew that of some incidents that were going on there at the school, and the father told his son, protect yourself. And so there may have been more happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to by any means, and maybe only he will ever know the truth about what happened. Hopefully he's able to come out and be honest and say what happened and what didn't happen. It seems strange that this is a 4th incident with a gun with him. It seems strange that everybody that was shot was a football player. And so that just definitely adds another layer
element.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, and I heard
looking to see if I could figure out what the connection was, and there's not anything yet that connects it.
And I read that the father also said that the assailant was supposedly being bullied and was somewhat paranoid. But again, we don't know by whom. We don't know what, like you said, what was going on behind the scenes. But it's not good on any front. But apparently, like these 3 young men that have lost their lives were great kids. And I'm sorry, but if I'm old enough to be your mom, then I'm going to call you a kid. And it's just a shame. Like, it's not meant as any disrespect, because it's sad. It's just sad. They had their entire futures, whatever their futures may be. So let's just hope they didn't pass away in vain.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Well, the thing is, there's no one. Go ahead, Megan.
It just, and I definitely don't like the blame game, when something like this happens. And even though I say, it seems strange that this was a 4th incident for him at UVA with a gun. And that's not insinuatory towards U of A, sometimes you just never know. You can't prepare for something like that.
Well, he had kids that from the university. So, and here's the thing is, I don't know if you watched the press conference with the president of the university. He was having a hard time keeping it keeping it together. He was visibly upset. So there's really no one in that whole university and any connection that will not be affected by this. And that's what's sad, is it's not just this little small group of people. The ripples will encompass parts of the, maybe the entire United States, just the ripples of who all was affected and how it adversely bothers them or whatever. It's not a great situation.
No, it's not. It's sad. I just, rest in peace.
Yeah, definitely rest in peace. I think we're going to slide over to the NFL now. That topic was pretty heavy. We had week 10 in the NFL this past week. We saw last night the last undefeated team actually lost. Eagles lost to the Commanders. We also saw the Cowboys lose on Sunday to Green Bay. Jen, how your team do?
Yay! My team did well.
Y'all get a win?
We got a W, baby. And it was a good game. However, sorry, I was not feeling well. So I made the very intelligent, but very, very exceptionally difficult decision not to go to the game on Thursday night.
I'm so glad you didn't.
Because it was raining and it was cold. And if it had not been raining, I would have gone. Or if it had just been raining and warm, I would have gone. But cold rain, nah. Had to be smart. But we did great. Like, basically, it came down to us just outperforming. I know we had a really bad game against Cincinnati, but I even said then that I thought we were preparing for Atlanta more than Cincinnati. And since we essentially don't have a starting quarterback, I thought it would have been smarter to start Baker against Cincinnati because he had more experience playing Cincinnati.
For sure.
And PG has more experience.
Rival.
Exactly. And PG has more experience with Atlanta. And PG did great 3 weeks ago now against Atlanta. I'm so sorry to cough. I didn't mean to. But yeah, we just held. And plus, honestly, Atlanta's defense is lacking. Their secondary is the weakest in the NFL right now. Has been for weeks. But, it's nice to see our team coming together as a team. And that Coach Wilkes has done that. And he's done that in 4 weeks? 4 weeks. That's all it took. It took 4 weeks. And interesting side note, I was telling Kari before the show that I heard a really interesting stat that Jeff Saturday now has the same record as Matt Rule when their team is trailing 17 behind at the half. And they come back for a win.
Okay, and so we saw the development of Jeff Saturday's first game as a head coach in the NFL, and they were able to get a win against the Raiders. Mm-hmm. I don't know that any of us were probably too surprised by that, but I thought there might be an element because the last thing he said as an analyst was the Raiders are not a good football team. So, Candy.
It's okay, Candy. We love you.
I got to give y'all credit. I said it before we even went into this game. Regardless of y'all's record, you guys are the kryptonite for the Cowboys. You constantly put us out of the playoffs, and Aaron Rodgers was due for a bounce back game, and sure enough, he had it against the Cowboys. I can say as a fan, it is unsatisfactory watching your quarterback, who you've paid a ton of money to, has not been able to bounce back. And don't get me wrong, the original injury was atrocious. His bone was coming out of his leg, like it was a compound break. It was an awful injury. Then he came back last season, and the first half of the season he had a great first half, and then the second half not great. And then the first third of this season he was injured and not a great game. And then now he's got probably just as many interceptions as he does touchdowns. And it's rough. Like I said, it's unsatisfactory. Like, I need him to have a couple of bounce back performances for me to feel like Dak is back. But speaking of the Raiders, what did y'all think about Derek Carr's press conference. Like he was in tears that they lost that game. I felt so bad for the guy, to be honest.
Let's
I
let
felt
Kari
bad.
go first.
I would say I felt bad. I've also read an article that Devontae kind of seconds, and he comes at it a little bit more strong, in stronger words, that Derek alluded to the fact that there's not unity in the locker room, that not everyone wants to be a Raider, not everyone really has, they're willing to buy into McDaniels. Carr alluded to that. Adams came out flat out and said there's problems in our locker room, and it pisses. I mean, like, he was very vocal about it, and he was very upset. Which, that makes sense. That they were successful last year, and then they bring in McDaniels, and they can't even win a scrimmage. So,
right.
And he said to Devontae even came back and said, "Hey, if they're not going to give me the ball enough," he said, "I got no business in this locker room."
Wow.
yeah,
That's
I mean,
for it to be unfolding like that in the media. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, there was an incident last year with the Celtics when Marcus Smart called out the play calling, and that the two stars, he was like, it's very predictable that who's going to have the ball. It's one of the two, and that's very predictable. And that ended up working out for the Celtics. Like, it helped them get it in line and work it out, and they ended up having an amazing second half of the season. Whereas it doesn't always work out that well, and you start thinking that certain players are throwing their teammates under the bus, and I'm just personally, I like to keep it in house. Just my.
Well, I mean, you had Carr and Adams speak out, and then today, was it today or yesterday afternoon, you had Mark Davis say that Rome wasn't built in a day, and so they're in a rebuild, and they're like, but you've spent all this money and you're wasting people's talents on that team. I'm thinking of several of them that I'd like, man, if they're you are throwing away careers of very talented individuals, and that's kind of sad, actually. But he's saying that McDaniels is the face, and I don't understand that.
I don't know if it's all on Mark Davis, though, because how could they could not have expected what would happen to their draft picks over the last 3 years, car wrecks, going to jail. Like, there's been all kinds of things that have happened, losing Gruden, like there was all kinds of things that happened that I don't know if Mark Davis is necessarily to blame for that. Like, does he have a role in it? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't think he's solely like to blame. Like, I think he's right. Like, look at all this stuff that we've had to, all this adversity that we've had to overcome just to even make it to the field on Sunday,
Well, and here's the thing. I think the one thing where Mark Davis should step up is you're in Vegas, Sin City. It's in the nickname. You make your players sign a stronger personnel contract or personnel conduct contract. I mean, go gamble, go do what you want to do, but you get an Uber, you get a Lyft.
Yeah,
if I make not even a tenth of what they make, and I can afford an Uber or a Lyft.
I don't make much money, and I tell you, and I like to drink, and I tell you what, I make it home safely, or I don't. I don't drive. I stay where I'm at, or I get an Uber. It's not that hard.
Exactly.
Listen, if I'm going to drink, I've got my bed parked here because I don't want to stay at somebody else's house. I want to be in my own bed. I want to go take off and be comfortable in my house, and I'm not driving, so. We don't, I'm usually the designated driver when we go out because I'm like, yeah, it's not that important. And I will make sure we get home.
I'm never the designated driver.
I want to laugh, but it's going to make me cough.
That's funny.
Dang
it. The one thing about
contagious.
the one thing about Week 10 at the NFL that we watched Tua go down. What, Week 3? Was that when we saw him go down?
That was the first time. Wasn't the second time Week 4?
Yeah, something like that. So here we are. a month and a half later, and we watched Juju Schuster-Smith get laid out, virtually a similar situation. He's now released that they've released that he has a level 2 concussion, will not be with us on this next weekend. I mean, he can't play this next. He will not be ready to play. The flag was thrown and picked up while he was still frozen he was hit and he froze, got stiff, whatever, like Tua did on the field. They threw the flag and picked it up and made the announcement that there was no penalty on the play, all while he is still laying in that frozen position on the field, trying to get him, moving him forward there. He did end up walking off the field. 2 plays later, same safety takes out or tackles Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, and he's put in the blue tent. He gets cleared to come back out. Same player within the matter of 15 minutes puts 2 players on our team under our concussion protocol immediately. Fast forward to Sunday night, and the same hit, a very similar hit to Herbert on the field, although Herbert did not, he stood up and he had that little wobble kind of like Tua did in the first game, but then they took him off and checked him. That guy was ejected from the game immediately. So,
and do you have a name? Who was it?
Why would you ask me that? Well, that would have been a good thing for me to have that information.
I'll Google it real quick.
Yeah. And it was actually the commentator, even New York said that
Andre Cisco.
Cisco for our team. Yes. I expect, and as a fan, I demand that Goodell and his league, his Gurons decided to find this man, because he did not, those were not,
well, and it's just a shame because actually Kari and I know one of the Juju's cousins. So as soon as I heard about the hit, I immediately messaged them or text messaged her, and I was just like, "Hey, is your cousin okay?" And she was like, "I don't know yet. My tia just called me from the hospital. Like they took him to the hospital. So his mom went to the hospital with him. So
he went later because he was in the locker room talking to them after the win. So or he went and came back. I doubt he went
probably
and came back. I don't think it would have been enough time because it was right before the second half, and then I don't think they would have had enough time to get him cleared back from the hospital. So I don't doubt that. That's not what I'm saying. I just know that when they came out for the press conferences, Reed, Mahomes and Kelsey all talked about, and Tony all talked about how they got to see Juju and he was in great spirits and he was giggling and he was all about being the normal Juju that they are a part of. So they were talked about that in the post-game press conference. So they got to see him. It was implied it was after the game, but that's all. I mean, that's just what I'm going off of. I'm just concerned that player safety is not being addressed correctly on the field. That's a scare for me.
That's been my concern since forever.
And you would have thought
because these guys know how to beat concussion protocol. Let's say sacks. They know how to. Like, there's no reason in the whole wide world Tua should be playing right now. He needed to sit out this season, in my humble opinion. I'm not a doctor, but
for him to be down on the ground he
was doing gang signs with his fingers, y'all. Legitimately. And I'm not saying that lightly.
Do y'all remember when Dale Earnhardt Jr. got a concussion and he actually sat out the rest of, I want to say the rest of the season, the NASCAR season, and then like half of the next NASCAR season, like Jeff Gordon came in and filled in for him because he had felt effects from the concussion for a year after. And so I can't imagine what it's like on that level as football, where you're getting hit over and over and over again.
Hey, Matt. Okay, Matt. Hold on. What I want to say this real quick. I'm sorry, Kari. The officials, and we discussed this last week, officiating needs to be even Steven and fair across the board, because even simple things like Jalen Ramsey taking off his helmet in front of the exact same officiating crew that fined and penalized DJ Moore did not penalize Jalen Ramsey, who took it up on the field of play. Exact same officiating crew. Then you're going to have one guy get a concussion and the player doesn't get hurt, and then the next guy, nothing happened.
If Cisco had been ejected after he or sidelined,
it would have never happened.
MVS would not have been in the tent. That's where I feel like, yeah, MVS hit was clean, but his hit wouldn't have happened had he been sidelined because of the Juju hit. And that's where that's where it's got to be, listen, whether it was intentional to be dirty or not. And I've listened to him on a video and he's saying I always lead with my shoulders. So I knew I didn't do anything wrong. And you're like, but you did. I mean, whether you led with your shoulder and whatever, you hit the man with your helmet, head-to-head helmet, and that's what caused him to have a concussion.
You're right. You're right. It's not exact same, but it's close enough to be the exact same. And that's where it needs to be fair.
That's the only reason that I am upset about MVS being put in the tent, was because the same player 2 plays later that he probably should have been benched or ejected based on what happened later.
So what happens if they adopt what CFB has done and put targeting out there?
They need to.
Absolutely.
And they need to follow through with it. It needs to be fair.
Listen, the refs, if they have flagrantly bad calls or they miss calls or something, why aren't they fined? We fine football players.
They need to be fined 100%.
Right. If I'm going to be held accountable for what I'm saying, and I can't come off and write my narrative after the play was bad or which is what I feel like they do with, the reviews and whatever, is they give a narrative, they decide what their narrative is and go on. If I'm going to be held accountable and my money is going to be affected by what I do, then I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it correctly, or at least come at it with, the team I'm officiating with. We're going to come at it with some consistency there. They need to be held accountable at some way. There needs to be a fine of some kind.
We talked about this last week too, like Jim was saying about the officiating, and I definitely don't want to come out and act like the ref's job isn't incredibly difficult. I once again can't imagine what they have to deal with on that type of basis. And players are known for being extra about certain calls, or wanting calls to go in their favor or wanting them not to go in a certain direction. So, there's more to it. And I get what Matt's saying. Let's go ahead and slide over to our last topic.
Oh, can I say one more thing? I'm sorry. To your man and to the Eagles fans, I am sorry. They lost to the Commanders, but I'm incredibly proud of Ron Rivera. I will always say I think he has the most integrity of any coach in that league. And rest in peace to his mother. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
I'm a huge Taylor Heineke fan. I don't know if y'all know this, but since they played the Bucks and played really, really well, I've been a huge Heineke fan. Anyway, and there was actually another little snippet that came through. It looks like OBJ has kind of narrowed it down to Dallas or New York. And even though we had a receiver that in CD Lamb that had an amazing game this past Sunday, 11 receptions, 150 yards, like he had an amazing performance. I'm in agreement with JJ about this actually, and saying that I doubt that affects OBJ's intent on where he goes. Like I think you look at Dallas and you think they're probably more of a contender than New York. So if you want to be with a contender, you're probably going to go to Dallas. If you want to go home and kind of save your reputation, you go to New York. That's my personal opinion on that. But last topic. I'm sorry about that, guys. Last topic. We actually got some really amazing news. Earlier or yesterday, Caroline O'Connor was named the Marlins president. She's the first major team with a woman as a president and GM. So such a huge move for the Marlins there. And just in women in sports in general. You don't have to be a man to be able to run a sports team, and I just love it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. As
All
it should
right,
be.
guys.
It should be the best person for the position, not
Right.
anything
If she
based on
has the
anything
best
else.
mind for the if she has the best mind for the job, then that's amazing. And I'm congratulations to her.
Mhm.
You know, once again, can't wait until that's not news. Like just because she's a woman and that makes the headline. Can't wait until that's not the case. When it is so common to see a woman in that role that we don't report on it anymore. So just
Absolutely.
thank everybody for commenting and watching the show and sharing.
Yes.
Like you guys do every single week. We appreciate y'all. And if you have any topics that y'all want us to touch on and we haven't touched on it, feel free to message any of the three of us or Candy as well. And we will see y'all back next week.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a great one.